in the circle of play, nothing is real, nothing can hurt you because you're playing. Outside the circle, yeah. Good evening, Cody. What do you feel like doing today?
I am interested in reviewing the world for a book. You and I spend a lot of time creating our own worlds. This is a game we've been playing for years now, but it's fascinating to me to take a look at the worlds that other authors create, especially worlds that can be different or vivacious or have qualities in them that I find to be newer to science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I want to talk about Gideon the Ninth, and I know you've enjoyed this particular book.
I have. What's not to like? Lesbian necromancers in space is fantastic.
It's a hell of a world. The idea of the world itself, when you recommended that I read this, swept me away. I mean, it reads like a 1950s pulp book. It pops up on the page, lesbian necromancers in space. Growing up, in the 80s, I was hoping for a movie with that exact title when I was a young person from Full Moon Entertainment, and you're gonna have to look that one up, but that's a fantastic film company. It sparked all of my interests all at once.
Well, then I'm glad you read it. Should I summarize it really quick for our audience?
Absolutely. So who's our author and what is this thing?
Gideon the Ninth is by the New Zealand author, fantasy science fiction writer Tamsin Muir, and I came across her with this book a while ago, and I really, really enjoyed it. The book, and spoiler alert, I mean, there may be spoilers, there may not be. We're not going to cut it out if they happen in the course of the conversation. So if you haven't read this book, go read it, come back, we'll still be here. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and pretend that you've read the book. Gideon the Ninth has been out for several years now. So in Gideon the Ninth, Gideon of the Ninth House is a young swords person who is attempting to escape their house. They are an antagonistic relationship with their, I guess you could call her the master, the necromancer of that particular house, and they're trying to escape. Through a series of convolutions, Gideon becomes the cavalier, the sworn swordsman of the necromancer, Harrow, and they go on an adventure in a massive haunted house, last visited by their emperor, it's 10,000 years ago or something like that, a myriad of years. Okay. In an attempt to become what is known as a lictor, the right hand of the emperor, the god emperor of this world, the necromantic god emperor of this world, the entire magic system in Gideon the Ninth is, in this Locked Tomb series, is necromantic in nature, at least so far that we've been exposed to. There may be others, but that's what we're exposed to now. So they arrive at this haunted mansion, this massive sprawling complex of puzzle rooms, and then explore through that with the other contestants in this massive race toward the finish line of lictorhood. And whoever succeeds, one pair, two pairs, three pairs, or whatever, representatives from each of the houses, 9 houses total, though of course we're missing the first house. And that's kind of the summary of it, like how they go there. More generally, we can talk about the political organization of these 9 houses, who they are, what they are, and the magic system. Which branch should we go down first, do you think?
I am a magic fan, so I want to know all about the magic. And this has a very unique feel to it. So the magic in this world feels, with the idea of necromancy, I am an old reader. So when I'm imagining necromancy, I'm imagining, a crouched, ragged character in a graveyard trying to summon the dead from the very early books, probably seated in Gygax's time, tell you the truth. But this has a definitive, very cinematic quality, a very anime quality to the magic in the way that it is used. These characters have superpowers instead of direct spells. Although we have spell work, the superpowers are our kind of thing. We could throw a cape on any one of them and have them go toe to toe with any Marvel character, and I'd bet on the Gideon crew. But the idea here is that this magic is a power more than it is anything else.
Yeah, that's true. They're not casting necessarily, you don't see a lot of finger waving, casting spells. The magic seemed to happen very quickly, almost instinctually in a lot of ways, and that develops throughout the entire series. Though there are apparently ways of creating formula or incantations enchantments that can stay on objects for a longer period of time. So the magic system, what is it? It's based off of death energy, necromantic energy, thanergy in the parlance of the book. Thanergy is created by the death of living organisms. Thalergy is created by the life of living organisms, and thalergy can be converted into thanergy when things are dying. How did this all come about? Well, the emperor resurrected everyone. We find out a lot more about that later on, but basically the 9 houses, around 9 planets around the sun, the Dominican sun, Dominicus, they're all thanergic planets, dead planets that give off thanergy. And the power of death, really. That power of death then is split into 4 general forms, and then 4 plus 1, I guess I would say. So there's the power of bone, flesh, blood, lymph, and spirit are the 4 general forms of magic that come out here with specific applications that are specialized, again, in the different houses, specializing each and then a slightly different application of each of these powers. The 9th house is the skeleton house. Everyone there is really focused on crafting and raising skeletons and putting them to good use and good work. And other houses, again, do various kinds of that.
So the houses are fascinating here. So they're linked to the magic themselves. So the houses specialize, and these houses exist within their own magic field, and there are of course political mechanizations between them. But the house structure brings up, like, for me, again, fully admitting here that I'm an older reader, but we begin this with house structure. It smacks a little bit of Dune. Even, I mean, we're going to go a little bit of grimdark here, but I'm gonna explain that away in a minute and say there's a little Warhammer bubbling around just behind the sockets here, and maybe, and I think this is probably more the case. There has been a whole wash of anime that has focused very much into clan structure or house structure as well, as a way to create plot flow. So I'm feeling those things when I'm looking at the political structure here. What do you think?
And the main influences. So sure, I could see Dune, especially in the Emperor, both in Dune and here, though the Emperor in Dune isn't 10,000 years old, but similar timelines, very deep history, right? So the world of Dune has existed and been developing for thousands of years, maybe even 10,000, I'm not sure, but very long timeline. In the world of the Locked Tomb, we again have a very long timeline. In fact, we're coming up on, as Gideon the Ninth opens, we're coming up on the first myriad, the 10,000 years after the Emperor, the God Emperor, created or resurrected the nine planets. So yeah, I could definitely see those parallels. And then there's magic users of a sword in Dune, and of course everything is based on magic here in the Locked Tomb. So Gideon the Ninth. So yeah, I could see that. What about anime? And you said, so do you have any specific anime influences in mind, specific books?
So this is where it gets interesting for me. So I as a teacher and an editor, I've been inundated over the last 15 years or so with folks who are inspired by anime, and there are operatic forms that I can see that kind of are structured throughout this. So I do have direct comps for this, but for this particular review, I'm winding that back because I'm seeing structure here. So we have a cantankerous wizard, and we have what amounts to the wizard's bodyguard. So the necromancer's eventual, oh, here comes the spoiler, love interest, where we have a developing relationship that goes through this, which really fits a lot of high school anime forms, and frankly, a great many of what we would consider the martial art epic forms. I can even relate this directly to Dragon Ball in a couple ways. But the idea here is that the anime operatic forms are laid on top of each other in a very recognizable way. We have our set of activities that happen. We have an unwilling relationship to begin with. We have opposing personality types, And then as we push the personality types further, we get a formalized necessary relationship where you have a formal house demand. So this is very much like how we play with Bushido, or even some of my favorite Yakuza anime where we're talking about who is, Kampai Senpai stuff. But once we get through this, we get into a very interesting place where these characters develop feelings, but only through the action towards the end. It's there, it's visible, the author does a great job, but at the end we have the reveal inside the denouement, the book, inside this titanic fight, inside this terrifying artifact of the dead. Then we get down to the moment where we say, I love you, and I love you back. And then, of course, I won't reveal that part, something really amazing happens.
The reveals do keep coming in the book. So again, if you haven't read it, you should. All right. So no direct comps. What, for me, aspects of the setting. So I said they leave Gideon and Harrow into becoming a match set. They leave, they go to participate in this grand competition with representatives, again, in match sets from each of the necromancer and their cavalier from each of the different houses. Not the first, for reasons that we don't need to go into right now, and but everything else. So there's a total of 16 people there, with a couple of additions. So again, we're not trying to get too detailed, but just a general overview. It's both focusing on the magic system, so, or the world building. And so they arrive in this massive house, the house of the emperor at one point, though he no longer dwells therein. And for me, that had connotations, or that reminded me of a couple of different things. First, the very gothic nature of the entire book. And then arriving in this house reminded me very much of Mervyn Peake's Gormenghast, Titus Grown, that series. Again, if you haven't read it, you should. Both in terms of some of the descriptions, the sort of, not quite as much magic, or any magic really, in Titus in the Gormenghast series, but in trilogy, but in terms of the general feeling when reading the line that the world is dark, gloomy, and nasty things happen around every corner, such feeling. And then there's also this puzzle room feeling, like an RPG or Myst, where as it's very stylized sort of competition. Yeah, they have to solve these puzzle rooms, they have to get from room to the room, they have to collect keys, all these fun little things that end up, in a sense, it doesn't feel like real life. It feels like a competition or a academic exercise, not a brutal battle. So there it drifts away from something like that's true grimdark, like Joe Abercrombie stuff, where it's, there's no rules. You kill the other guy and grind his face in the mud. Versus this, where, you can kill the other guy, but there are rules to that. There are duels to that. And there are, subterfuges that happen that you have to dance around this set of very strong rules. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you hit on something really interesting. And to pull a direct comp out of my nose, one of the older anime that has popped up in my past is Inuyasha, where we have a relationship between what is effectively a demon and the person that they have to protect, and a person who's key, effectively a magic character. And the stylized nature of the fighting there, which is, again, those operatic forms. Duels are really important to operatic forms, Japanese operatic forms, Chinese operatic forms. And those duels, especially duels that incorporate wit plus the physicality, the athleticism behind it, will harken back to that form that I'm appreciating throughout this entire thing. So that leads me to another hook that I want to talk about, something that you already know about me that I want to share. But I used to fight combat sports, very specifically medieval combat, Renaissance combat, full armor, full metal stuff. I don't do such a thing anymore. My body can't keep up. But I'm fascinated by depictions of combat in books, especially dualistic or ritualistic dueling in a book. I think it's really fascinating. And here, that's pretty much what we have, is stylized ritualistic duels, which, again, this is why I keep slapping that operatic form thing, is the duel is important because the beats within the duel describe relationship. And I think in Gideon the Ninth, this is part of the romance, is how the duels are fought, because they mimic the romance itself. The underwriting is, this is going to be hard, we have to do something crazy, this doesn't necessarily work out, but in the end, through all of this massive adversity and quite literally mortal wounds, or immortal wounds, we end up in a situation where we come to an understanding. There's always a reveal, which I appreciate.
So I like this concept of the duels. I want to ask you about that a bit more. So we have duels on multiple levels, right? We have the duels with the puzzle rooms. So there's a limited number of keys. You can't get into a room without the right key. People aren't sharing keys, or they are sharing keys, and blah, blah, blah. So there's that sort of Machiavellian duel going on there, that game aspect of it. Then there's a game of the actual puzzle rooms. If you get into the room, you have to solve the puzzle. So there's the game, which is also kind of a duel, because they're not sharing necessarily how to solve each one. They're definitely not. There's a bit of competition. As an aside, the ninth house, Gideon's and Harrow's house, is considered an outcast. And so no one really likes them. They're very weird among very weird necromancers. And so no one wants to talk to them, really, though they're, of course, the center of the action. Then there's, as you say, the duels that happen between the various cavaliers, both the play duels and the real ones that happen. And then there's another level of dueling when the real bad people are revealed. Spoiler. I told you, I warned you, we're just going to talk about it. And if you don't want to have spoilers, don't keep watching. So there's more, you're right. So multiple levels of duels, and then they branch off each other and build on each other as well. So, and just in terms of the first duel, the game, I guess, what do you think the influence is there with the game as it develops, the game of finding the keys and getting into the puzzle rooms?
When you mentioned Myst, I think that's a nice comp. In fact, there is a gamified element to this that if I went fishing and started to fishing through my mind and started to think of game elements that I might have discovered from, say, other media properties, I'm sure I could find a couple in here because it feels rife with that. But the idea, I think, is that gamified sense of, here we have to solve this puzzle, we have to do this particular thing in ritualistic format is, again, I think it harkens back to those really early depictions in Japanese art of the adversary, which is the adversarial romantic relationship of, you have to win me, or I have to win you, or I have to destroy you. There's no in between there. And this is constantly reflected in the action of the piece. So whether it is finding a key, for instance, or whether it is dueling, a ritualized duel for honor, or in the end, even the large climactic denouement battle that we have, that is still there. It is that sense of winnowing down to where we connect in this kind of romantic way. So we have Harrow and Gideon finding each other. And this can be, I mean, I can go full hardcore and say this reminds me of the anime Berserk, but man, that I could write you books on why I think that. But it comes down to the ultimate destruction of body and self that keeps up the love that we're having here. And when I say ultimate destruction, boy, howdy, do I mean it here. So the influence, I think, is definitely there. The combat is bombastic. So we've got, I mean, if I were going to put this on screen, we'd need an awful lot of wire work. We'd need a lot of zoom in on, a weapon dragging on the ground before it's used to smite someone. We'd have to have close-ups of faces with little blood coming out of the corner of their mouth as they wipe it away to get ready to fight. This is stylistic fighting written large on the page, and I'm very appreciative of it. Every action feels like a Dragon Ball punch, with the added benefit that it does not take 8 episodes to get to the resultant hit. In fact, Gideon the Ninth is really economic in the fighting, and I appreciate it. I don't get sick of it. It doesn't last too long, nor is it too short. Feels pretty nice, actually.
As you say, the action is heightened. It's not realistic action. It's a bit heightened action. The relationships are also heightened. They're not realistic relationships. They're heightened. The drama of the scenario. They're in a series of locked rooms, right? In this locked tomb series. That's also heightened. I like how Tamsin Muir creates this idea of this game, this competition, honor, formal rules, etc. But as you work your way through the book, as the layers are peeled off, the game, which game play by its very nature requires what's a bloodic circle, is within the circle of play. Nothing is real, nothing can hurt you because you're playing. Outside the circle, anything happens, but inside the circle, you can only really be free in the game if you can play without fear. And that can only happen if there are consequences outside the circle. And then I talk about the book and the writing of the book. The writing is great. I like the line a lot.
You know, the thing that matters the most here, I think, is the relationship world that's developed.
Basically, enemies to lovers, right? As a very basic romance plot. So enemies to lovers, and then you have a competition. And then you have the rivalry between the houses, right? So in that competition, those are very basic plot elements, tropes, if you will. But in this case, I think the setting plays a very strong role, both in the way those elements work together in the story and also in the text. I think where Tamsin Muir is really successful is in evoking these necromantic magics by her use of language that describes, in the case of bones, it describes which particular bones are being stretched or deformed or multiplied, and the fat and the viscera and lymph, whatever it is. She gets into anatomical detail, medical terminology, which adds, it's set dressing, but it's integral to the way to the story itself. Every story is driven at its core by relationship in one way or the other. People read for character. Even the most plot-driven pot boiler novel, you're also interested in watching the character, the detective or whoever, fight his way through it, right?
Makes sense. And I'm a huge fan of an entire universe of necromancers, and I'm a huge fan of these things, the body as a resource. It's something that I'm fascinated with as a writer, and I think it does a really great job doing it. And at the end of all of this, I want to say two things. One, this is a hell of a read. It was enjoyable all the way through. It's one of those books that sticks with you, and it's also it drove both of us to meet together here to talk about it. And if you have not read it yet out there, those of you who are watching, this is a great opportunity to pick that thing up, because you really, believe me here, you want to read about necromantic space lesbians. It's necessary for your happiness, I guarantee.
And the world of building and writing is pretty fun. Yeah, I think so. I 100% agree with that. Go read it, and meet us back here next time, where we either build a new world or talk about the world of someone else. If you'd like to get some of our stories in your inbox once or twice a month, then you can do that at worlds.workingtitle.us. And if you'd like to support us for the podcast, you can do that at the podcast support tier at the sign up sheet. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.
And next time for horror.
Well, we have to if we're doing a necromantic lesbians in space show.